Imagine this scenario: a man dressed in humble clothes, sitting in first class. Next to him, an arrogant executive who despises his presence. What seems like a trivial clash of worlds turns into a lesson that redefines the meaning of success. What would you do if your worth was judged by your appearance? This is the story of how Keanu Reeves turned an ordinary flight into a journey that changed a life forever. First class, champagne, arrogance, and a phrase that made everyone tremble. Water in first class? But what happened next? No one saw coming. Los Angeles airport was seething with chaos. Suitcases hitting the floor, hurried voices, lost looks. In the crowd, a man walked with unwavering calm. Worn jeans, simple boots, a backpack that told stories of 1,000 journeys. It was Keanu Reeves. As he waited in the first-class line, his serenity contrasted with Victor Harding, a passenger in an impeccable suit who adjusted his gold watch every 2 minutes. "First class, huh?" Victor whispered with an ironic smile, scanning Keanu from head to toe. "You never know who shows up here these days." Keanu just nodded, his silence charged with a peace that Victor could not comprehend. What neither knew was that, in a few hours, that flight would become a mirror, and Victor would be forced to look at his own reflection. Victor Harding was not a man who accepted uncomfortable silences. For him, every second was an opportunity to prove his status. "Do you work on anything specific?" he asked, pointing to Keanu's backpack with disdain. "Film," Keanu replied without looking up from his book. Victor let out a short laugh. "Film? Short films? Animations?" Keanu gave a slight smile. "Something like that." Victor swirled his champagne glass as if the bubbling liquid validated his superiority. "I, on the other hand, manage 7-figure investments. Nothing to do with that." Keanu nodded, indifferent. His silence was a wall that Victor was determined to tear down. As they took off, Victor tried to ignore Keanu's presence, but every gesture irritated him. How he kept his reusable water bottle, how he folded a napkin to mark his book, even how he breathed calmly. "Water in first class?" he finally said, breaking the silence with a forced laugh. "You should enjoy what money can buy." Keanu held his gaze, unperturbed. "Simplicity is enough when you know who you are." Victor frowned. That phrase would haunt him until the last second of the flight. The plane cut through the clouds, but the real storm was happening in seat 2A. Victor, in his designer suit and scent of expensive ambition, could not hide his discomfort. "Look, nothing personal," he said, pointing to Keanu's plane belt, "but there are exclusive places for exclusive people." Keanu looked out the window where the clouds reflected his serenity. "We all end up in the same place when we land," he replied. The passengers around held their breath. Victor, intoxicated by his own arrogance, did not notice that every word of his was digging his own grave. "Self-help philosophies?" Victor spat, raising his glass like a trophy. "Success is shown, not whispered." Keanu closed his book slowly. "Success," he said, measuring each word, "is knowing that what you have does not define you." Victor leaned back in his seat, sure of his victory. But in the air floated a question that would soon hit him. Who was really the weak man in that first-class row? While Victor talked about priorities and achievements, Keanu watched the sunset from the sky. He didn't know it yet, but in less than an hour, a 4-word phrase would shatter that world of appearances. "Mr. Keanu Reeves, your connection." But that would be another story. Altitude wasn't the only thing that rose in the cabin. Victor, with white knuckles around his glass, launched one last challenge. "You know what's funny? People like you talk about humility because they have nothing to show." Keanu put his book down slowly. His eyes, always serene, now pierced the air like ice daggers. "I have met many who shout their achievements to silence, the emptiness they carry inside." Victor held his breath. At that instant, champagne spilled on his impeccable suit, but it was his pride that was truly stained. The glass shattered against the floor. Do you think you're better than me? Victor roared, standing up. Keanu remained seated, his silence more eloquent than 1,000 words. The passengers held their breath, until a soft voice cut through the tension. Mr. Keanu Reeves, your connection in Tokyo is confirmed. The name, Keanu Reeves, echoed like an echo. Victor paled. His eyes were fixed on the man he had underestimated minutes before, and he saw for the first time what others already knew. A giant who doesn't need to brag to be immense. I didn't know who you were, Victor stammered, his voice broken. Keanu turned to him without triumphalism. Respect doesn't depend on a name. It depends on how you treat those you think are less than you. The words floated in the air, heavy, as lead. Victor looked at his gold watch, and for the first time it seemed insignificant. As the plane descended, Victor felt how every lie he had told himself crumbled. Keanu, on the other hand, signed autographs with the same calm with which he had drunk water. 2 men, 2 worlds, and an uncomfortable truth. Greatness is not bought. It is built in silence. But Victor's inner storm was just beginning. What if everything I've built is a facade, he thought, digging his nails into his leather seat. He watched Keanu interact with a little girl who handed him a shaky drawing. Thank you, he said, folding the paper carefully. Victor remembered his 8-year-old daughter, whose last call he had ignored for an urgent meeting. The emptiness in his chest became tangible. At that moment, Victor was not the powerful executive, but an absent father, a distant husband, a man who had exchanged genuine smiles for empty promotions. Keanu, handing out another autograph, returned the reflection of everything he had lost. When did I stop being human, he thought, as his gold watch read 9:47 p.m., the exact time his daughter had stopped waiting for his calls. As the line to exit moved forward, Victor remained seated. Excuse me, he murmured, his voice as broken as the crystal of his shattered glass. Keanu turned, expectant. I didn't know who you were. That doesn't excuse anything. Keanu nodded, without judging. Apologies are not for me, Victor. They are for you. A silence hung in the air. Outside, the plane's stairs connected to the ground, and Victor felt that something in him also touched ground for the first time. Keanu disappeared into the crowd, surrounded by sincere smiles, not flatterers. Victor watched him from the window, his reflection superimposed on Keanu's in the glass. 2 men, 2 paths. One chose luxury, the other humanity. Who am I without all this, he murmured, touching his suit wrinkled by spilled champagne. The yes answer was in the airport, in the hugs of strangers to Keanu, in the little girl who kept his drawing like a treasure, in everything he had ignored to pursue a hollow success. Victor did not take his private limousine. Instead, he stopped in front of a phone booth. Coins rattled in his trembling hand. Hello, it's me, he said, as he dialed a number memorized years ago. On the other end, a child's voice shouted, Daddy? Victor closed his eyes. Yes, honey. This time, I'll make it to your recital. Tears streamed down his face, cleansing layers of accumulated arrogance. As Keanu helped an elderly man with his suitcase without pretense, Victor understood. True, success is not measured in first-class seats, but in the moments when you choose to be human. What do you think of this story? If it inspired you or made you reflect, tell us in the comments. We want to know your perspective. That flight was not a journey between cities. It was a journey into what they both carried inside. Keanu went his way as always, invisible to the world of show business, but unforgettable to those who needed him. Victor, for his part, left his gold watch on an airport bench. He no longer needed time to remind him of his worth. Sometimes the most important journey is the one that brings us back to ourselves. If this story inspired you, subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge the way we see the world. Share this video with someone who needs to remember the power of kindness.